Introduce myself. My name is Alan Miner, and most of you, I didn't get a biographical sketch in David Acey. He wrote up a few things, but there's not much to know about me. I'm a common person, just like yourselves, with just a special interest in the Book of Mormon. In my life, I've participated in the church. I've been a teacher. I prize my teaching more or less above all of the other callings. I've taught almost every age group in the church. Priests, deacons, teachers, high priests when they were awake, elders, 70s. I've taught at stake level and ward level. And right now I'm teaching in the primary with my wife. So hopefully all of the other colleagues help me to prepare for the primary calling. My interest was sparked on the Book of Mormon, as well as maybe a lot of your interest was sparked during the presidency of Ezra Taft Benson, when in the first conference in April 1986, he gave out some prophetic lessons to the church and said that if we would read the Book of Mormon, basically, it would open up to us like it never had been before. And I had come off my mission and finished my schooling. I finished BYU and took my dental studies at Washington University in St. Louis. And I had, done a number of things, and my family was started, but it had been a number of years since I fulfilled my mission. I served a mission in Guatemala and El Salvador, and I had some special assignments there where I had a temple assignment where I was in charge of busloads of people from Central America, traveling through all of Central America and Guatemala and Mexico to the Mesa, Arizona temple for endowments there, which that was a tremendous experience in and of itself. It allowed me to see a lot of the country. It allowed me to see a lot of the culture. And it allowed me to experience some feelings that were very, very special regarding those people. And so I started reading the Book of Mormon again, and I started reading for a purpose. I wanted the confirmation of that testimony just exactly like the promises were made, and I wanted those feelings back that were there on my mission. And they came back, and they came back in ways that will always be close to me. Things that are just for me to know. But along with these feelings, I felt like I was finally free to go ahead and ask whatever question I wanted to the book. As I read, in my mind, I said, I am going to feel free to whenever I come to a place I don't understand or want an answer to, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to mark it. I'm going to get me a book, and I'm going to ask that question. And so I did. And then I realized, well, how do I get the answer? And I thought, well, basically, I'm responsible to get my own answer. But I thought, certainly, there are books available. And so I started searching after books that might answer the questions that I was asking. But the questions just kept piling up, but then again, the books came along. And I found that it was a remarkable process. The idea of asking, and you shall receive. The idea of knocking, and it will be opened unto you. It was a real revelation to me that the fact that if I didn't knock, nothing would be open. And so I started understanding things in the Book of Mormon like I never understood them before. But I got around to reading books, and I got around to especially the books on geography, and all of a sudden, because of my experience in Mexico and Central America, I saw things. I mean, in my mind, I saw things, and I was able to understand what they were talking about. And in the communication, I was able to put what they were trying to convey together. And so I don't know why I got up the nerve, because I'd really never done it before, but I started picking up the phone, and I started calling people and visiting people and getting acquainted and asking them why they said what they did. And I'm very fortunate, as probably all of you are, to be close to these people. Joseph Allen, Bruce Warren, John Sorensen, great people who have spent their lives in study of Book of Mormon lands. Garth Norman, I mean, they're our neighbors, and yet they represent the cutting edge of understanding of what Book of Mormon geography is all about. And not only that, they are men that not only have given their lives, but they'll give you a few minutes to talk about things and to talk over questions that you have. But ultimately, I realized the responsibility was mine. And I was taught that in a nice way by Bruce Warren, because I would go over to visit him and he'd invite me over, and I thought he was so gracious, and I would ask him some questions, and he would nod and think, and he would say, that's an interesting question. And I felt so proud. I thought I was plowing new ground, you know. And he would say, well, come on down with me, and we would go downstairs, and in his basement, it's just lined with books, wall-to-wall books, all over the place. And he would pick out a book here and pick out a book there, and then he would say, you know, these are interesting books. You might want to read them. And so I would say, well, okay, you know, and I would go home and I would read them, and there would be some answers, or there would be some perspectives on what I just asked you, you know, and I realized I wasn't plowing the ground, but it was interesting anyway. And so I got involved in a whole new world of Book of Mormon geography and culture. And as I learned, I can remember anything for a minute, but give me a week and I'll forget anything, you know. And I'm just like your RAM memory in a computer, and if you turn that computer off for the night, it's gone. So in order to keep a log of what I was learning, I had to write it down. Whenever I read an article, I had to just take the essence of that article and write it down. And pretty soon things accumulated, and I had to sort of have a system of correlating those ideas. So I linked it to the verses, and over the years, it accumulated until all of a sudden I had a commentary that was pretty interesting. I mean, accumulated thoughts from dozens and dozens and dozens of scholars. And I had gone through the text of the Book of Mormon. I had highlighted it according to the verses, according to verses that related to geography, chronology, covenants, and all of a sudden there were patterns there. And I thought, boy, these would be interesting to other people. And as I went through books, I thought, there's a lot of pictures and charts here. These would be interesting in teaching. And so I just started collecting, and it became an ongoing process, and part of that is now posted on the website of Ancient America Foundation. It's a website, you can get to it. Just go to www.ancientamerica.org. And that not only has articles, but any of you who have used the website and typed in Book of Mormon realize that you've just been immersed into a sea of anti-Mormon literature. And you'll be lucky to ever extricate yourself from that. What this site does is it links up with all of the other positive websites on the Book of Mormon. It has a list. You click, you're automatically to the website. You bypass the problems with anti-Mormon sites. And it's part of a developing coalition where we work together and help one another. because various people have different perspectives and points of view when it comes to Book of Mormon geography and culture or whatever. That's to be cultivated. That's to be enjoyed, rather than be involved in this terrible debate over who's right. It's nice to just realize that there are a number of perspectives and to learn from all of those perspectives. And so that part of my work is on there. It's an old, well, it's not old. It's really, I mean, each one of those books is like 300 to 400 pages of commentary, and there's 7 of them, and each book has its own highlighted scriptural text, and each book has its own volume of illustrations and maps. So you've got 21 books there. But step by step through the Book of Mormon. And if you go to download it, just give yourself some time. Like I said, it's loaded. But you can download it into your WordPerfect or your word processor, and then print it out as you want to print it out. I wanted to make things available to people. I want it so that it doesn't take you forever to get what you need to get. And it represents the cream of the crop on scholarly opinion. It represents diversity. It's not the final word. It's just what's been printed, and there's more to come. I mean, I've got a whole ton of stuff to revise it, but I spent the last 1.5 to 2 years doing this project, which has sort of sidetracked me, and I thought it would sidetrack me for about a month or two, and it's been 1.5 years, and I'm not done. I've got most of the way through all of the sources that need to be taken care of. What I found in reviewing different theories, as you go to somebody who proposes one thing versus another, you come across these quotes. They bring up this quote by George Q. Cannon or by Joseph Smith or by Oliver Cowdery, and they say, this is what they said, and it means that this theory is the right theory, and you're going, well, you know, where did you get that, and why did he say that, and what was going on at the time, and how do I evaluate that, because I don't know the rest of what he said, and so I was getting confused by these new comments or new information coming from old sources. And so what I decided to do was, in the same vein as what I've done before on Book of Mormon commentary, is review everything. I wanted to go back to the very beginnings of the church. I wanted to glean every authoritative statement that had ever been made on Book of Mormon geography, or the origin of the Indians, or the Polynesians, or anything that related to the matters of Book of Mormon culture. And so I did. I started out with the sources that I knew. I contacted the people in all of the different organizations. There's a number of organizations that work on the Book of Mormon culture and geography, both in the church and in the reorganized church, or the Community of Christ is now called. You've got some great people who have their testimony of the Book of Mormon. Their church has changed, it's evolved, and it's just sort of moved them right out of that church. But they joined the reorganized church in their lives because of the Book of Mormon. And they understand that book, and they've studied that book, and I've learned from them, as well as all of these other people in the organizations. But what's happened is that I told them what I was doing, and they jumped on the bandwagon. They said, this has really never been done. We would love to be a part of it. We will open our files to you, and we will help you in what ways we can. And so I've had that help from the beginning. Nonetheless, the people in special collections at BYU are getting tired of me. And it's a hard road. A lot of these sources, especially when you deal in special collections, they don't necessarily want whole manuscripts copied, and so you have to read and pick and choose what you want. Ideally, or ultimately, it would be a great project, and it would be a hope of mine that all of the old sources could be digitized and be available in like an info-based type format, to where you could insert a disk in your computer and you could search, and you could go to the talk, you could go to the pamphlet, you could go to the map, you could go to the illustration, whatever you wanted to, and it would be there. In the meantime, I've had to type in the essence or the good parts of all of these articles, all of these books, and that's what I've been doing, is to try and on my own enter as much of this information, enter all these quotes, so that it's there, so that it's available, and that's what I've been developing. Now, I'm not finished, but I'm most of the way there, and the neat part about this project is that it's given me a final resolution of how to what should I say, communicate step by step through the Book of Mormon. Because step by step through the Book of Mormon had commentary, which was linked to the text, which was linked to maps, which was linked to illustrations. How do you go back and forth? How do you publish something like that without having it cost a fortune? And how do you change things? Because one of the things that Joe told me a long time ago is that the minute that his book, Exploring the Lands of the Book of Mormon, hit the shelves, he wished he had it back. He says, I wish I had it back. I wanted to change things. But when it's in a printed edition, the publisher just doesn't want to change things because it costs so much, and you have to print 10,000, 20,000 at a time. So with the format that we have on computers now, we can link up text, we can link up illustrations, we can link up commentary to where you can switch back and forth, you can change it at any time. You've got the storage capacity for hundreds, thousands of pictures. And so you've got a marvelous capacity for learning. Marvelous capacity. And it can be so simple. You just plug in the disk, it boots up, it tells you what to do, you click, you automatically are transferred if you click on one of the icons, from a commentary to a picture to a map or whatever. And so we've come to a time where there's marvelous technology, marvelous opportunity for learning, and the stage is set. Now all we need is to understand where we're going and understand some perspectives here, so we will more or less stay within the ballpark of reason, and we don't get out on some sort of tangent as far as where we're going. Okay, one of the things that I thought I would do with you today is to give you an overview of the basic, I mean there's all sorts of variations, but the basic ideas on Book of Mormon geography and why they developed. Okay, okay, the hemispheric theory was not the first to come out of the lips of Joseph Smith. It developed first, but it developed for reasons we don't know. And we can pinpoint it, but not to Joseph Smith. We can pinpoint it to early parts of the church, but our search ends with Oliver Cowdery, or our search ends with Parley P. Pratt. First of all, Lehi traveled nearly a south. This is a statement that was found when John Bernheim was copying the inspired version of the Bible. He also included a statement that said basically what's said up here. That statement was attributed to Frederick G. Williams. And Frederick G. Williams was a counselor to Joseph Smith. He was also a scribe. And so this was, I mean, this evolved to where by 1882, in a pamphlet published by Franklin Richards, this statement was prefaced with the words, Revelation to Joseph the Seer. So it evolved from a little scrap of paper found that was attributed to Frederick G. Williams to a revelation. This profoundly affected how people looked at Book of Mormon geography, because this was the southerly limit of of lands. Okay? So let's see what it says. It says, Lehi traveled nearly a south-southeast direction until they came to the 19th degree of north latitude, then nearly east to the Sea of Arabia, and then sailed in the southeast direction and landed on the continent of South America in Chile, 30 degrees south latitude. Well, first of all, for many years, up until the last couple of years, this statement was dated to 1836, Frederick G. Williams, at the best, okay? Certainly before our times, it was dated to it was attributed to Joseph Smith, but ultimately Frederick G. Williams, and you think, oh, you know, that's back in the School of the Prophets. Well, in recent investigations, we found that the idea that Lehi landed in Chile is attributed to the missionaries who went through Ohio on the first missionary efforts to the Indians. And that missionary group was Oliver Cowdery, Ivor Peterson, Peter Whitmer Jr., and Parley P. Pratt. Parley P. Pratt was baptized in Lake Seneca by Oliver Cowdery, and so those two are linked. And when they went to Kirtland, that's where they discovered Sidney Rigdon, but they also found a man by the name of Frederick G. Williams there, who accompanied them after he got baptized. So we can nail this down to 1830, but we don't know whether it came from Oliver Cowdery, we don't know whether it came from Parley P. Pratt, we don't know whether it originated with Frederick G. Williams, we don't know. But it was early. And the School of the Prophets was conducted in 1836, where all the brethren met together and discussed things such as geography. And so we know that at least this idea was shared with the prophet. What he did about it, I don't know. I mean, Joseph Smith said, he told a German lady who was writing down every word he said as if it was prophecy, he says, look, he says, you know, don't quote me on everything. He says, a prophet's only a prophet when he's acting as a prophet. And so, you know, I reserve the right to believe what I want to believe. So there's, Joseph Smith gave himself some breathing room there. But in this theory, South America was the land southward, Panama was the narrow neck, the land northward consisted of those areas of Panama and Central America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and the hill Cumorah was in New York. Oliver Cowdery, in letters to W.W. Phelps, described the early parts of the church and referred to the hill Cumorah in New York. I mean, there's without a doubt, in the minds of the early members of the church, that was where the final battles took place. That was the hill Cumorah. I mean, they wrote about it. There's all sorts of references there, with the exception of Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith referred to the hill as Cumorah. He never said anything about final battles. Okay, so we've got a problem to a certain extent. Let me go. This is. I'll show you some pictures here of it. This is a modified hemispheric theory. In 1879, Orson Pratt published in the new edition of the Book of Mormon footnotes, which basically said, when it says that Lehi landed in the Promised Land, it says near Valparaiso, Chile. And when they got the final battles, he said, well, this is near Manchester, Palmyra, New York. This is the hill Cumorah, New York. And other references. The Sidon was the Magdalena River in South America. South America was the land southward. North America, I mean, it was the hemispheric theory. And you can imagine when everybody read their Book of Mormon, and Orson Pratt was the editor of the time. In other words, he and his brother Parley were the editors of the main papers, the main publishing places of the saints during the pioneer times. So everything came through them. And so you have numerous articles explaining the geographic theories of Orson Pratt. So it was overwhelming. So everybody, I mean, where else? It was natural. I mean, you had this little narrow neck of land, you had South America, you had North America. It was just a natural thing. Okay? The problem is that people started to look into things a little bit. And they came across some statements by Joseph Smith himself when he was editor of the Times and Seasons. In 1842, he published in a couple of articles, he basically said that Bountiful was near a place, or could have been near a place in Guatemala, not Bountiful, but Zarahemla, could have been near a place in Guatemala called Quirigua. Okay? And he also said that Lehi landed just a little south of the Isthmus of Darien, which is Panama. Okay? Now, in another occurrence, and we don't get this till 1881, 40 years later, but a patriarch in Richfield by the name of William McBride was speaking to a group in St. George. And he was telling of when he was a boy in Nauvoo, and Joseph Smith came over to his shop and talked with him about where they were going. And he described to him the route that they were going all the way west. And then he got into the subject that was parallel to the route of Moroni, who was coming from the land Bountiful and going up to Utah and dedicating the temples in St. George and dedicating the temple in Manti and Nauvoo and Jackson County. And so it was that route. And this William McBride wrote it down. He copied it down. He made a map. He copied these places down. And one of the notations was Bountiful was in Central America. Well, if you know anything about Book of Mormon geography, you know that Bountiful is in the land southward. It's south of the Narrow Neck. So if it's south of the Narrow Neck, then, and Central America is north of Panama, then you've got a problem. You've got a geographical problem. You've got a statement that does not fit with the hemispheric theory. And so, to those people who came across this statement, they started to think a little bit. And they started, but they really didn't, they didn't start to think until longer than you would suppose. In other words, in the 1880s, George Reynolds was the first to really publish on the Book of Mormon. He published the Book of Mormon story, he published concordance to the Book of Mormon, published the Book of Mormon dictionary. Those things were republished. Many of you probably have some big volumes like that in your home of George Reynolds. He was a secretary to the presidents of the church. He was a test case in polygamy. He went to jail basically as a guinea pig. And when he was in jail, he decided to spend his time cutting up all the verses and all the references in the Book of Mormon, every word in the Book of Mormon, and categorizing it according to what it was. And so you have references, Zarahemla, and you have everything in the Zarahemla. He was a human computer. I mean, the things that we do now by computer are only a little bit extensions of what he did. Tremendous effort, and it allowed things to be studied, but studied on a hemispheric scale. But what it did was it caused the explosion of people wondering, okay, let's see if we can find this. So let's see if we can, where's this place? Where's Zarahemla? Where's Manti? And so in the year 1890, you had George Buchanan of the First Presidency came out with a statement. He says, look, he says, geography is not the prime purpose of the Book of Mormon. And when you get in, he says, all sorts of theories have been proposed, and some of them differ thousands of miles in where people are. And so he says, until we find something better, or until something comes along, let's not have these battles over Book of Mormon geography in our lessons in church. Let's not invite speakers to sacrament meeting to speak on their favorite theory of Book of Mormon geography. Because right now, we don't have, and they didn't have the scientific means to prove one way or another that anything was right or wrong. People just took a map, put a pin on it, decided this was good, drew a line, decided that was good, and that was their basis. Well, in 1904, from Utah State University, there was an organization there where a young man by the name of Joel Ricks decided to go down to South America. And he made an expedition trip down there. He viewed all those lands. He wrote back reports to Deseret News. They published it. They published his first-hand accounts. He described the land. He described the options. He described possible theories. And when he got back, he made a map. And in 1908, in the Juvenile Instructor, which was edited by George Buchanan, I think, I'm not sure. I can't remember all these things. It's written down somewhere, but my mind's not a steel trap. Anyway, what he said was, until this time, we have discouraged Book of Mormon maps. But since Joel Ricks has gone down there, since Joel Ricks has made the effort to investigate on a first-hand basis, we would like to let you know that his map is recommended for teaching in the church. It's not an official map, but we don't think you can go wrong in using this map. And so that's, I mean, a great idea. Okay? They were open to new things. Unfortunately, the juvenile instructor quote, that authoritative quote, is never used by those people who want geography out of the curriculum. The only statement they remember is George Buchanan's statement to say, don't use geography or don't teach geography. They don't ever try to follow it up with another authoritative statement. And so you have all of these people who don't necessarily want geography, or, you know, they have this statement that they've used. It has been used right up to the present day. But it's not a valid statement, because it's tied to new ideas, new scientific things, and what we do. So anyway, this whole concept of the ideas. Oh, another thing that happened is in 1879, there was a man by the name of G.M. Oettinger, who also published in the Juvenile Instructor these ancient histories of these Indians in Central America. They had histories that told about where their origins, and it talked about their white god, who they called Gucumatz, or another name is Quetzalcoatl. But this Gucumatz supposedly was located around a river, and that river was called the Usumacinta. And this G.M. Oettinger proposed in 1879 it wouldn't be a bad idea to try and look for Zarahemla on this Usumacinta River, which is the beginnings of a modified hemispheric theory, because it's not in South America. And so, but the real changes came about in 1920 when they were reviewing the Book of Mormon. They had a committee of apostles and authorities of the church that got together, and they invited certain people to present their ideas to see what they were going to do with these footnotes in the Book of Mormon of Orson Pratt's that basically proposed a hemispheric theory. So they got together and they invited some people. One of them was Willard Young. He was the 30th son of Brigham Young. Not only that, but he was extremely bright, and he had been in the headlines of the newspapers back east because he was a distinguished candidate to West Point. And the newspapers had followed him along as a representative of the son of Brigham Young, because they wanted to crucify him. And they realized that he was outstanding in every way and graduated near the top of his class. He took his training in engineering. He worked in and around Niagara Falls, which is near Rochester, which is near Palmyra, and the New York Hill Cumorah. He also worked in Central America. And so he understood the terrain there. He understood everything about the two environments. And he studied. And along in 1917, a man by the name of Lewis Hills, which was from the Reorganized Church, who had also had studies in Central America, came out with a number of books, not only on the historical histories of those people, but on geography. And he proposed that all of the geography of the Book of Mormon, all of the happenings of the Book of Mormon, from beginning to end, took place there in Central America because of the histories. That's what the history said. And that's where the intelligent people, that's where the groups of people that corresponded to those times, more or less, that's where they were. And so he proposed that theory, and Long Payne Willard Young also proposing that theory. And in 1920, that committee met and reviewed the theories by the hemispheric theories. They also reviewed the limited Mesoamerican theories, and they realized there were some valid points. There were some sticky spots, because if they were going to quote Joseph Smith, Joseph Smith was saying bountiful's in Central America. Joseph Smith was saying that Zarahemla might have been near Quirigua, Guatemala. What do you do? And so you've got this limited Mesoamerican, which was completely foreign. You've got this hemispheric, and along comes a man by the name of Johnny Sojo. And some of you have got books, Sojal and Reynolds, that have been compiled. Basically, those ideas are from Reynolds. Those are not ideas from Johnny Sojal, because Reynolds was a hemispheric man. Johnny Sojal proposed a modified hemispheric, in the which that he brought the narrow neck of land up from Panama up to the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. In other words, that included in the land southward Central America. So all of a sudden these ruins, all of a sudden these Indians, all of a sudden all of that was acceptable. You just had to move that narrow neck forward or up. Okay, 15 minutes. He didn't attempt to change the location of the Hill Cumorah at that time, like Willard Young had tried to do. Willard Young brought the Hill Cumorah down into Central America. Johnny Sojal left the Hill Cumorah up there, but he moved the narrow neck and modified this hemispheric theory. Okay, let me go. Okay, the limited Mesoamerican theory. The reason that this caught on, and the reason that it still catches on, and the reason that scholars gravitate to it, are not just the dots and lines, although they are important, but people can interpret the internal geography of the Book of Mormon in many ways and have valid reasons for what they are doing. I originally thought that, you couldn't do that, but after going back into the histories and seeing the details that they wrote, they had some tremendous ideas. But one of the things, or a number of the things that really nail this area, first of all, is that it has these chronicles. The Catholic fathers, the Indians, they had their histories. And those histories told of people coming across the sea. They told of things similar to what you might envision a Hebrew culture doing, or Hebrew practices. And not only that, but in the different cultures and the time periods, you were able to locate a culture for a time period that correlated with the Nephites. You were able to locate a culture that wasn't very far off, that was Jaredite and Mulekite, and with written records and all of it, and major rivers, and you're going, whoa, there's a lot of correlation here. Maybe we'll dive into what the culture tells us is similar, and maybe leave the dots and lines till later and see how they develop. But we'll develop them wherever the histories tell us. We'll develop them wherever the cultures tell us. And so this linking of these histories, and along with this narrow neck of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, it took hold with scholars. It didn't take hold with authorities because of a couple of things. One of the things is that the church in 1928 acquired the New York Hill Cumorah. You can imagine what a fantastic treasure that was. So much of the church is wrapped up in and the New York Hill Cumorah experiences, legitimate experiences. And they wanted to celebrate that, but what do you do? And what happened is that the first presidency and a number of others, Anthony Ivins in 1928, came out with statements which basically in conference said New York Hill Cumorah is definitely the Hill Cumorah. The next year, in 1929, he said, Book of Mormon geography is not known. And I'm hitting my head, I'm going, what's he talking about? He just basically identified this Hill Cumorah. Now he says Book of Mormon geography is not known. What happened in the minds of authorities is that they separated the two. In other words, you have authority proof for the New York Hill Cumorah. All of the rest of the Book of Mormon is classified as Book of Mormon geography, where you don't have proof. Okay? And so those things are discussed in different ways. So there's a separation here of what's going on, but the thing that really, I mean, certainly there are people lining up on both sides. There's a discussion going on, but the real, or what should I say, the real telling point, how much time do I have? Okay. The real telling point comes in the year 1938. And it's a decision that I can't put my finger on, but it's a course that was mapped in that year, which has had ramifications that have extended this day. There were some things that went on that seem completely incongruous, and yet when you look at them and look at them and look at them in view of what went on afterwards, you start to understand them. There was a committee of the church education department, the highest level of education regarding study of the Book of Mormon by students. They put out a manual. This manual basically reviewed the hemispheric theory. It also reviewed the fact that people such as Sojal had proposed a different theory. People such as Willard Young had proposed a different theory. They had different ideas as to where the Hill Cumorah was, where the River Sidon was, where the Narrow Neck was. And they said, that's acceptable, because the church doesn't have any official stand. And so go ahead, talk about these things, but don't, I mean, our purpose is to talk about the gospel, and if this comes up, fine, but there's no official position of the church. Great stuff. I could live with that statement today. I wish it had been plastered on every church education system manual from that time forward, but it wasn't. And what happened is that in 1938 you had a speech by J. Reuben Clark Jr. It's called The Charted Course. And in that speech, what he said basically was that the basic principles of the gospel are what get us to exaltation and salvation. If we sacrifice teaching those basic principles to the expense of any other thing, then how are we going to face our Maker? How are we going to face those who have been looking to us to educate the young people? What are we saying? And so basically he said the charted course is basic, fundamental, doctrinal principles, nothing else. In the church education system since then, you will find periods where that speech is repeated and repeated and repeated. They come at certain critical periods, and though that speech is made again, and it puts down research. It puts down a lot of things. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. In fact, if that's the inspiration of the leaders, and that's the direction of where they wanted, then it was inspired. The problem when it comes to Book of Mormon geography is that Book of Mormon geography suffers. Whenever you put down research, whenever you put down the idea that Book of Mormon geography is even important enough to talk about, then it's not even brought up. So what you see over the next years is the church education system gradually depleting every reference to the New World geography. In an incongruous way, they seem to feel it's all right to talk about geography in the Old World, which has never been proven. But they don't want to talk about geography, even if it's a theory in the New World. On the other hand, you get statements. Joseph Fielding knew what was going on. People that, the Washburns, these people that had proposed the limited Mesoamerican theory, they had come to him. He was historian of the church. They had reviewed their theories with him. He knew what was in the works. And yet, all of the authority, he felt like it was his job to protect all of the authoritative statements that he knew about. And so basically, starting in 1938, even though he reviewed this manual, even though he reviewed a manual that says it's okay about these other theories, he came out in the church news with an article that basically it was an article that was really, really critical of anybody who had proposed any Hill Cumorah site other than New York. And he used authoritative statements to back him up. And he went into authoritative statements that some of them were questionable. But it was a persuasive argument, and being in the church news, it pretty well put down things for a while. But at the same time, you had the beginnings in 1938 of the Itzon Society by M. Wells Jakeman, and he became the first department head of archaeology at BYU. BYU appointed him. BYU allowed him room. BYU allowed him room to teach Book of Mormon, and those philosophies were different than the hemispheric theory. That developed into the University Archaeological Society. They had different ideas. That developed into SEHA. That led the way and prepared the way for farms. You had this organizational structure that was in a way parallel to the authoritative structure. And whereas the church was simplifying and deleting, they were also allowing room for these organizations to develop and flourish at BYU. And in a nutshell, that's what we have. We have, although people in their authorities, in their personal way of thinking, have made statements, that's their personal way of thinking. And so basically, what we come down to today is, for good or for bad, the church has no avenue to teach Book of Mormon geography. Not in their institute classes, not in their seminary classes, not in your gospel doctrine classes. There is no venue. That's the way it is. Live with it. On the other hand, we have the extreme opportunity for organizations such as this, for learning, for growing, for asking questions, for studying the Book of Mormon. It just has to be on your own time. It has to be with your own money. And yet, we've got that opportunity. And just, I don't know how many of you were the lecture of Joel, but basically, he was saying, and what I've come to believe, which brings you full circle, that your ultimately Book of Mormon geography and culture will become important when you realize that they are part of the spiritual message. They are not to be discarded. They are part of a whole. And that's what I've come to learn. And that's what I hope that you will appreciate as you continue to study. I apologize for not getting to the pictures. Maybe I can do the pictures later. I don't know. But if there are any questions,
let's go through them. Let's see them.
Okay. All right. 2 seconds. Okay. There's the earliest picture that we have of the book of the Hill Cumorah in New York. Okay. That was done by Eber Howe, anti-Mormon, but he got us an early picture. That's looking from the north. That's the eminence. The hill was stripped of trees early on. this is the hemispheric theory. Early statements related the land of desolation to the northern hemisphere. This is an extension, a modification of that. You get the land of bountiful starting to be in narrow neck of land rather than in South America. These are the maps that were drawn in the Charles Lowell diary that William McBride in his speech talked about the travels of Moroni, where Moroni came from the land of bountiful in Central America. This is the position in Central America. This is the position of Kiriguá, right here. Okay. And this is the position of Copan, which was another instance. They correlated a river of Nephi with Copan. This was an expedition of Benjamin Clough in 1900 from BYU. They decided they were going to go to Book of Mormon lands, and so they mounted up on their horses and wagons, and they took off. And they got bogged down, and it was sort of a mess, but a lot of good things came out of it. And one of the things that they wanted to discover was they wanted to see about these ideas about Tehuantepec being the narrow neck of land. So in 1900 they were thinking, well, maybe there's a change. Okay, this is, I don't know if you can see the detail, but this is Sojal's map where he has Bountiful up here. Okay, instead of Bountiful being right here in South America, this is where he has Bountiful. He's moved that narrow neck up to the Isthmus of Tehuantepec instead of right down here. Okay, this is Lewis Hill's first map, which is a limited Mesoamerican map. It's so detailed, it's hard to follow it on a screen, so I won't even attempt to. But just realize that's the very first map of a limited Mesoamerican. This was supposed to be an internal map, and this is the first internal map that we have that was printed by the church was in 1838. And but this was an overlay of that internal map, and you could realize that what he had in mind, was maybe Central America. Here's another internal map that was printed, and this is still printed, I think, in the church education manuals. It was done by Ludlow in 1964. It has some real problems with it. First of all, you've got North Sea, where Hagen launched a ship. He didn't launch his ship into the North Sea, he launched it into the West Sea. And so you've got a number of things there. But you see, also, in the Book of Mormon, it was designed to represent relationships of places. And can you see one big place in the Book of Mormon that is absent? There's no Hill Cumorah. And the reason being is that all of the internal studies that were being done were coming up with the Hill Cumorah close to the narrow neck. That's a problem, because if your narrow neck is Tehuantepec, or if your narrow neck is Panama, you've got a long ways to go before you get to the Hill Cumorah in New York. So, okay. Cut it?
I'm sorry to interrupt. 45 minutes is just not enough time.
Okay. That's fine.